Hello and welcome. My name's Samantha and this is the Learn to Heal podcast. This is a podcast where we're going to talk about traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture and what it really means to understand your body through this different lens. I've wanted to create this podcast for a long time because I get asked so many questions and people are curious. They want to know what traditional Chinese medicine actually is and how acupuncture works and whether it can really help them with the things that they are struggling with. So in this podcast, I'm going to share how we work, the kinds of things we treat, and some behind the scenes case stories so you can see how the medicine works in real life. My aim is to make it understandable and practical and not mysterious in any way. But for this first episode, I want to start by introducing myself and sharing a little of my own story because it explains how I came to see the body the way that I do today. I originally trained as a beauty therapist and I travelled the world working on cruise liners, in hotels and spas, and I spent years working very closely with people's bodies through massage and facial treatments and hands-on work like aromatherapy and reflexology. And those years gave me a deep respect for how everybody's body is different and how much the body communicates if we know how to listen. And when I came back from my travels, I wanted to deepen my knowledge. So I trained as a teacher and I began teaching in further education colleges at first. Education's always been a big part of who I am. I love helping people to understand things and not just tell them what to do. And not long after that, I joined a large skincare company called Dermalogica. And at the time, they were known for being leaders in education and for taking a whole body approach to skin health. So we didn't just look at products, we looked at aging process, pigmentation, eczema, psoriasis, your stress and lifestyle, and how all of those things can show up through the skin. So it was during that time that I was first introduced to traditional Chinese medicine. We would have guest lecturers that would come in, and one of them came in and taught us the basics of yin and yang theory and Chinese face and body diagnosis. So how the shape of the face, certain features and lines could give you clues about somebody's internal health. And I was completely fascinated and it planted a seed. But at that time, I had a mortgage and a busy career and it wasn't realistic to go back to university just then. But fast forward about 10 years, I had my daughter and I took a career break and I suddenly had the space to ask myself that bigger question: what do I want the second chapter of my career to look like? And that question brought me straight back to traditional Chinese medicine because by this point I had a very personal reason why I became so passionate about the medicine. Before I trained, I'd struggled for years with digestive issues and I was eventually told I had IBS, and I tried so many different things, diet changes, supplements, cutting foods in and out, going on big cleanses, but nothing ever really worked or fully resolved it. And when I first had acupuncture and Chinese herbs, I was honestly quite skeptical at first. But over the course of the treatment, as the months went on, my symptoms improved by around 80%. It wasn't an overnight miracle, but it was the first time I felt like my body was actually being understood as a whole system and not just a collection of different symptoms. And it was that experience that changed the way I saw healthcare completely. It wasn't about suppressing symptoms anymore. It was about restoring balance and helping the body to regulate itself again. So I decided to go back to university and I trained at the Northern College of Acupuncture in York, completing a Bachelor of Science degree in traditional Chinese medicine. And then I did a further year study in something called Tuina, which is Chinese medical massage, something I'll talk about in another episode. But one thing I want to clarify early on is that acupuncture is just one part of a much bigger system. So before we even pick up a needle, we have to understand you and your symptoms, your history, and how your body is responding and how everything is connected. So traditional Chinese medicine is in itself a complete healthcare system. It takes 3 to 5 years to train, because we're learning how to diagnose patterns in the body, not just treat isolated symptoms. And around 40% of our training is in Western medicine. We work in a Western system, so we learn anatomy and physiology, disease processes, medications, diagnostic pathways. We need to understand that from a Western perspective first, and then the remaining 60% focuses on traditional Chinese medicine. So we take those same disease processes and we look at them through a completely different lens. So when you come in to see us, we will have taken a history and we'll be looking at things from both of those perspectives, but we're also observing you from the moment that you walk in, the way you walk, your posture, the sound of your voice, how you might be breathing. All of that gives us information. We take a pulse, but not in the same way your GP might. In Chinese medicine, the pulse tells us how fluids are moving through your organs, whether there's tension, whether there's weakness, heat or deficiency. We look at different positions and we look at different depths to understand different systems in the body and how they are functioning. We also look at the tongue. We look at its shape, its size, its colour, coating, and often we'll look at the face as well. And these are tools that help us build a picture about what might be going on beneath the surface. Once we've gathered all of that information, we look for patterns. So symptoms that might be unrelated, how your neck tension is connected to your digestive system, for example. And often that helps us make sense and connect the dots. So what makes traditional Chinese medicine particularly powerful is that it recognizes the role that emotions play in physical health. So we look at stress, where it's held in the body, how it affects different organs and pathways, and how that might show up as pain, tension, or chronic symptoms that develop over time. So when we treat, we're not just thinking about what happens on the treatment couch either. Acupuncture creates an opportunity for change in your body, but what happens between sessions has the biggest impact on long-term health. So we might see two people that might come in with the same diagnosis, say sciatica. We might treat them differently and give them different advice based on how that condition is showing up for them in their body. One thing about this medicine is it's always individual. So over the course of this podcast, we're going to break some of these ideas down. We're going to talk about how the channel system works and what's really happening when we place the needles, what acupuncture is working on, all the different levels. So the physical level, the neurological, emotional, and the energetics. And it can sound a bit woo-woo if you've never experienced it before, but at its core, it's actually a practical, observant, and a deeply logical system. Most importantly, this podcast is about helping you to understand your body better, not fixing it, not forcing it, but learning how to work with it. So thank you for being here. I'm really glad that you found your way to the Learn to Heal podcast.